Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, John Bates. John's a guy who makes it hard to illustrate all of his experience and impact in a minute or less, so I will tell you that he is a leadership and communications expert. He has worked with CEOs and clients all around the world, including, but certainly not limited to, NASA, Intuit, Johnson & Johnson, and more. He's been featured in news programs and media outlets all over the world. He's given multiple TED Talks, and he teaches people how to maximize their impact through their exposure moments. And I'm really happy that you're all here to learn from him today as we dive deep into a conversation about communication, listening, leadership, speaking, and more. He's going to teach us why communication is biological. It involves not just logic, but lots of biology as well. And in fact, logic oftentimes is what gets us in trouble. To that end, he's going to talk to us exactly about how to build emotional credibility. And in doing so, how to show insightful vulnerability. He's going to teach us how to make the complicated sound simple and about 100 other things in the time that we were able to share today. I'm really excited that you're all here to listen and learn from him as well. Thank you for being here for another episode. While you're online, please just take a couple of quick moments to check out our sponsors. As always, head over to humantel.com. That's where you can enter the code INQUASIVE25 to get 25% off their best-in-class online training to recognize when people's emotions are shifting by learning how to accurately interpret shifts in their facial expressions and nonverbal communications. For the professional interviewers who are listening, head over to certifiedyinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. How do you qualify? How do you earn the designation? What can it mean for your career moving forward? And finally, while you're online today, please check out INQUASIVE.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask them to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, negotiation teams, HR teams, and more, as we teach them how to communicate with people so they will choose to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences. We really appreciate you being here for another great episode. Thank you so very much. Let's get right to it. Without further ado, I introduce to you, John Bates. Hello, John. It is great to see you again. I'm so excited for this conversation. How are you?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thank you. Really glad to be here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And since we first connected, I've been really looking forward to diving into, especially the communication topic, speaking topic, whatever trouble we find ourselves into for the next hour. I really can't wait to dive into this. So instead of me wasting more time telling everybody how awesome you are and all the things that you've done, I want to just open up with a question that comes right, I think, from the red meat of what you teach. And from your perspective, why is communication biological?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that is the red meat of my training. I do a lot of work with people who are super logical engineers, finance people, just all these super logical people. And I always, I realized myself at a certain point that communicating with human beings is not logical. Right? I mean, you've noticed it's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But anybody who goes in thinking logic by itself should win, well, maybe you could make the argument that it should, but that doesn't mean it will, right? If someone goes in thinking logic by itself should win, they'll just never be very effective with human beings. And, the core piece of that, if we just want to jump right into it, is if you look at a cross-section of a human brain, and you'll see it's called the paleomammalian brain. Paleo because it's old, right? Like the paleo diet and all that kind of stuff. And mammalian because all mammals have this. So we all have the paleomammalian brain, the dog, your cat, the horse, and it's very old. It's not the lizard brain, right? The lizard brain's in there as part of it, but it's actually a little more sophisticated than that. And then wrapped around the outside of that is the cerebral cortex or the neocortex. And, what does neo mean? Neo means new. So the new brain is actually wrapped around the outside of the old paleomammalian brain. Now, I'm going to say something that's kind of weird. So I'll say it twice, but it's key to understanding this. And it's key to why I think this is so important. The paleomammalian ancient brain does not have access to language or logic or reason. That's all in the neocortex wrapped around the outside. It does not have access to language or logic or reason, but it does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously. Now, I'll say that again because it's weird. The ancient paleomammalian brain does not have access to language or logic or reason, but it does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously. And what I mean by that is this ancient part of the brain is the part that smells pheromones, and it sees facial micro expressions, and it reads all that totally unconscious body language that we are constantly unconsciously sending and receiving all the time when we're with other people. And it sees patterns in things, and it smells things and hears things and sees things that we will never notice consciously. But it notices because it's that ancient part that's keeping us alive, and it's paying attention to everything. But since it doesn't have access to language, it can't just tell us, oh, hey, by the smell of this person's pheromones, you should not get in the elevator. It can't say that. So the way that it communicates with us is through gut feelings. So if your mom didn't tell you, I'm telling you now, trust your gut, right? That's actually good information. It's scientifically proven good information. Get good at distinguishing what is a gut feeling, right? From other things. When you're good at distinguishing that, you will have a huge advantage in life, just in general. And we all think we're logical, right? So people are like, oh, John, well, I know about the logical fallacies, so I weigh things out. I check the boxes, and okay, great. Maybe you do that stuff. And if you do that stuff, it's helpful. But if I took the most logical person that's listening to this right now and put them in an fMRI machine and we watched their brain in real time, what we would see is that, boom, as they make a decision, boom, the paleomammalian brain fires first, making the decision. And then nanoseconds later, but still later, the cerebral cortex fires, agreeing with or disagreeing with the decision, but not making the decision, right? So why does that matter? I guess is the next question. So why does that matter? Here's why. You think about a situation that's similar to the one I'm going to talk about right now. I'm going to make up a situation, put in your own variables, and let's see if you've ever had this experience before. So, do you like the product? Oh, yeah, we like the product. Yes. Do you think it's priced well? Yeah, it's actually a fair price. Yes. Well, do you think it would make a difference for you to have it? Oh, certainly, yes, it would make a big difference. Well, would you like to sign the check and we can start delivery? No, we're not ready yet. We want to think about it some more. Okay, what just happened? Right? Like, why would they do that? Were they lying? I mean, they did say yes, 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 and then finally a no. Where did that come from? People get upset when they get that, right? Like I've worked with teams who've gone out before they work with me and they've got $1 million proposal at Accenture that they're multi-million dollar, they're trying to sell to some company, or people that are raising their A or B round, millions, hundreds of millions on the line, and they get yes, 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 no. That makes people very unhappy. Now, why did that happen? That's a good question to solve. So it's very obvious in hindsight, even though in the moment it's not super obvious. It seems like they were lying, but they weren't. It's yes, 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 no. That's logic, 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 emotion. The neocortex wrapped around the outside of the ancient brain, the neocortex, the logical brain, is all in. It's like, yes, 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 great price, perfect. It would make a difference. We want it. But then it has to go through the emotional brain, the ancient paleomammalian brain, to get to the spinal column to send the signal to sign the check. And guess what? We didn't make an emotional connection with them that was strong enough that they could give us that fourth and most important yes. Now, does that track with any of your experiences, Michael? Have you ever had anything like that happen before?
Without a doubt, in multiple contexts. First of all, I love a guest that answers and asks their own questions. So thank you very much for knocking both out for me. I really appreciate that. Well, absolutely, both in the business world, in which you already gave an example of, but even in my previous investigative career as well. I can think of a few interrogations off the top of my head where, to me, I don't know why they're not confessing. No, don't get me wrong. I've messed some up, and that's why people didn't confess. Those aren't the ones I'm talking about. But times where, like, I feel like they've got both feet over the line, but I can't quite get them there. And there was one in particular. It wasn't a huge case. It was a typical fraud case, but I couldn't get him there. Everything was telling me he's good to go. He's good to go. I couldn't get him there. And thankfully, I realized he was wearing a chain with a boxing glove on the necklace. And I've trained martial arts. I've never boxed. And so I went into a story about how, if we're training for a fight and we skip leg day once, we skip leg day second time, we skip leg day third time, it doesn't matter. We feel great, but now we're in the fight and we're ahead on all the scorecards. But by the time you get into the 8th round, your legs are getting tired, and then you know where it goes from here. We end up losing a fight we could have won because we didn't get the prep work done first. And that's what this conversation is all about. And I could see the emotional shift towards the end of that story. And then he finally confessed. And what's funny is once we started telling the truth and he went to write his written statement, he told me that the reason why he was hesitant is because the director of HR, the person who brought me in, he babysat her kids. And she didn't think it was important enough for me to know that prior to the conversation. So that's one that jumps out. But in working with sales teams too, I'll see people who were like beside themselves. How come that didn't work? Well, what's completely logical in your brain could be entirely irrational in somebody else. So trying to walk them down that logic trap, when that springs, if they're not 100% there, it can push them further away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's perfect, right? That's exactly it. And again, it doesn't make sense on some level. It doesn't make sense, right? It's like human beings are not purely logical creatures. No. That emotional stuff really, really, really matters.
It matters a ton. And I was surprised early on when I first started to learn that there's an emotional component in every decision that we make. So to your point, even when I felt like I was as logical as possible, it turns out I wasn't. And I think that's a great segue to something else that you talk a lot about, building emotional credibility. So if being
fake TM there.
I'm working on it. We'll get it out there. But if being over logical feels great to us, but is largely counterproductive in the end, then to use your trademark in progress term, how do we build that emotional credibility in order to be successful really in these high leverage conversations?
Yeah. So first of all, like that, there's a combination, there's two word combinations that it took me 15 years, or maybe you could just say my entire life, to come up with. And I'm really proud of them. And I think that they really make a difference. And one of them is emotional credibility. And I think that just being aware of something called emotional credibility and understanding that, when you're like, I keep taking it back to the pitching to raise fundraising, because I'm like a lifelong entrepreneur, but it could be anywhere. It could be sales. It could be maybe even interrogation, right? But like when you go in there, your credibility is already established, right? They wouldn't have given you a meeting at this primo VC firm if they didn't think you were credible. But people walk in, and I know because I talk to them. I'm like, well, what do you want to, what's one of the first things you want to accomplish? And they're like, well, I need to establish my credibility. I'm like, no, 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 no. If you try to establish your credibility at this point, you're going to tarnish it because it's already established. What I would like to focus on is establishing not your credibility, but your emotional credibility. And whenever we meet people, particularly in a business setting, but anywhere really, that emotional credibility, I think, needs to be one of the first things that we're aiming for, right? Establishing our emotional credibility. And, the dark side already knows all these tools.
Oh,
And because the dark side uses them so often and so well, a lot of people on the light side just don't even want to pick up a lightsaber. I'm sorry, but Darth Vader is swinging a lightsaber. And if you don't know how to use one too, this whole thing's going to end really quick, So I am only, teaching people that I believe are on the light side of the force. But, establishing that emotional credibility needs to come very quickly, because once you establish that emotional credibility, everything you say after that point gets heard differently because you have emotional credibility. So the first thing that I do with pretty much everybody I've worked with over the last 15 years, because I just see the value of it, is work with them on what I call their origin story. But it's a particular version of the origin story. It's a well-chosen, well-crafted, well-delivered, very specific version of their origin story of how they came to be doing what they're doing. And when we tell that origin story well, we craft it and tell it well, one of the fundamental outcomes and one of the most important outcomes is to establish that emotional credibility. And one of the things that I always want to include whenever I can in that origin story is the other 2-word combo that I came up with at the same time, because that other 2-word combo is insightful vulnerability.
ooh.
I want to share some insightful vulnerability, because that is one of the fastest, deepest, best ways to establish emotional credibility. Make sense?
It does.
So, that, because people are always like, oh, vulnerability, and people are always talking about vulnerability. But when I work with top executives, they're like, well, John, what are you talking about? Like, me be vulnerable? I'm like, yes, I want you to be vulnerable, but I don't just want you to go get stuff on everybody. And it's not just vulnerability for vulnerability's sake. And it probably doesn't look like what that executive who's resisting is imagining, right? But Les Brown taught me years ago, people don't connect with your successes. They connect with your messes. Your message is in your mess. And that is what ultimately led me to coming up with this whole formula for origin stories. But when you're able to share a place that's relevant, like an experience where you blew it, or you embarrassed yourself, or you were really down, and then you figured something out, you learned something, there was an insight, and then you got through it. Well, if you share that whole thing, what we're left with is not what a loser you were. We're left with, oh, wow, you're self-reflective, and this is a great lesson. I'm going to remember this lesson, right? So people don't connect with your successes. They connect with your messes. Your message is in your mess. So when we do that origin story, I'm always looking for what was a really low moment on your path to doing this. And how did you get through that? What was the lesson you learned? What's the insight that we can share?
That's a great point. Better than I've heard anybody say it before. But I want to double down on that kind of resistance to vulnerability. I think when, especially
Please.
top executives, when they hear things like be vulnerable, when they hear things like create a safe psychological space, it makes them throw up in the back of their mouth at least, if
Yes.
not all the way out.
Yeah, sure.
And that's fair. I get that reaction too. But when you realize how to employ that in a way that maintains the credibility, we're not overextending, we're not sharing a sob story. This is a true story about a mistake I made and what I learned from it. This is a true story about the first time I learned how to do this. This is a true story about a true time I thought somebody said X, it turned out to be Y. All of those things. It's the universality of the human experience. And once somebody else realizes that we're experiencing the same universality, now the depths that we can go through together, the problems we can solve, the mountains we can climb are a much different picture.
Yeah. Can I tell you one of those stories? And so if somebody's listening and you're resisting, here's a story and let's honestly see how it leaves everybody feeling. So come back with me. It's probably 20 years ago, almost. And I am sitting in this course with like 150 people that I think are way better than I am, because I'm in a course for global leaders. And everybody in that course pretty much is doing global leadership. Like they're working with the UN. They've got a nonprofit building schools in Africa. So there's all these amazing people. And I feel like, I'm only in the class because they said, well, you can be a self-declared global leader, right? So I'm a self-declared global leader. And the woman teaching the course, I have a mad crush on because I think she's super beautiful. And she takes no BS from anybody. Her name is Francesca Papagayo. And I am like, I've got a crush on teacher on top of feeling like I don't belong, And so one Saturday morning, I raise my hand in this class and she calls on me and I go up to the front like we're supposed to. And I say something really good. And, I can tell that it really landed. And then I start to say something else. And Francesca Papagayo says, John, stop. And I'm like, what? And she goes, do you know what you just did? And I'm like, no. And she says, you got up here and you said something really brilliant and you forwarded the conversation. And then because you got a good reaction, you started to say it again. Do you know what that's called? And I'm like, no. And she said, that is called insulting the listening. Do not insult the listening. Go sit down. Oh, dang, dude. Like, I felt like I just wet my pants in front of like the whole room, So I went back and I sat down and I had to deal with the fact that all that was true. And so I sat there the whole day, just super uncomfortable dealing with myself. And I realized two really big things. The first one is, okay, I need to trust myself as a communicator. If I say it once, I'm good enough at communicating that I don't have to say it again. And I started noticing all the places where I would say it once and then say it again and maybe even a third time, right? And oh my gosh. And then the even deeper, harder thing to get to was a few days out still on that Saturday. But it dawned on me, oh my gosh, I need to trust my audience. What if I trusted that they got it? I'm a good communicator and they got it. And I'm telling you, the power of my communication went through the roof when I got those two things. And it was probably the most embarrassing moment of my adult life,
Well, thank you for sharing it. I certainly appreciate that. I think that story resonates hopefully with everybody because we've all said something dumb at least 1,000 times in front of a group of other people. But it is true that often we learn the biggest opportunity we have to learn is when we make mistakes. And unfortunately, the biggest mistakes often create the best learning opportunities if, to your point, we're able to put our ego in our back pocket and actually work through it. And that's a tremendous example.
Yeah. I mean, and if I didn't share that story, I'd be the only one that benefited from that experience. But the minute I share that story, I mean, I see people's faces light up when they're done laughing at me, right? Their faces light up and they really get something. And that whole don't insult the listening has made an enormous difference, not only for me, but for a lot of the clients that I've shared that story with. And that's what I mean by insightful vulnerability. It's not, hopefully it doesn't make you think less of me, ultimately.
My guess is it would make people think more of you for any number of reasons. But that's a perfect example. And I'm glad you said it twice because you brought it back to the insightful vulnerability. But it's vulnerability with intent. It's true,
Yes.
which is the most important thing. You didn't make it up. It's not bullshit. Like, it's a true story. But it's a true story that fits within a shared context that provides a learning opportunity for the audience that they can relate to. So now we can work through this together. And it doesn't have to be, well, one time when I was a little kid, this happened. Yeah. Like, that's not the type of vulnerability we're talking about here.
No. Yeah. No.
That's a great example. And I feel like that ties into something that I was taught a long time ago too, and clearly you were as well, that as a leader, part of our job is to help everyone else learn from our mistakes so they feel comfortable making new mistakes. Don't repeat the ones I've made. Just go out there and make some new ones. And so again, as I just continue to rip you off, one of the things that you like to say is communication is a function of leadership. I think I got that in the right order.
Yeah. I mean, and hey, you're not ripping me off. You're amplifying me. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. And I'm happy to do it. So when we think about communication being a factor of leadership, besides making it okay for other people to make mistakes and helping them open up and helping them be a little bit more daring and a little bit more trusting, therefore a little bit more successful, how or what importance is the function of communication for leadership?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, since I'm an executive leadership communications coach, like it almost feels self-serving when I say this, but I also think it's just freaking fundamentally true, which is maybe why I do this. Imagine that person, and I know many of these people, I watch them at my own companies, but imagine that person who has that brilliant, great, awesome, incredible idea, that wonderful product, that, way to move things forward, whatever it is. And now imagine they don't communicate it effectively. And people maybe hear what they say, but like nobody gets on board. Nobody's connected to it. Nobody does anything about it. Plop. That great idea just falls totally flat and nothing happens. Right now, like, just to make it more painful and twist the knife a little bit, let's imagine the person with a much less good idea, still a good idea. Okay. Hopefully still a good idea, but not as good as the other one, but they communicate it brilliantly and everybody understands and they go, oh, wow, great idea. Meanwhile, the other person's sitting there going, but I just said that. I had a better idea, but they didn't communicate it well. So we didn't get it, right? It's all about, I used to check the box religiously and super stoked to check it. I told you so. Boy, I was a real, I told you so, oh, you should have listened to me. I told you so. What I realized is every time I checked, I told you so, I was not getting what I wanted. So I started getting interested in checking the box. I landed it over there. How can I check the box? I landed it over there. Right. And that was a huge jump in my effectiveness when I started taking responsibility, not just for what they hear, but not just for what I say, but actually taking responsibility for what they hear. And, as a leader, if you've got a great idea or you've got a project or you've got a, transformation that you want to champion and you want to see happen, how are you going to do that without communicating it well to the team that's actually going to implement it? And then on that team, okay, which team do you want? The team that's really good communicators or the team that's not very good communicators? Like, I want the good communicators, because that's how we make stuff happen as human beings. there's very little we can do by ourselves. I mean, arguably nothing we can do by ourselves. Cause like if you plopped out when you were born and nobody helped you from that point on, you would be dead.
Yeah. All great points. And it's, I guess I say it a little bit more sarcastically, but like, congratulations on having something wonderful to say. How we say it doesn't matter. How it lands does. So understanding the audience, understanding the context, understanding their fears, their goals, their motivations, and adapting what we do for them is the most important thing. And the way that you illustrated that is perfect. How many times has the best idea failed? How many times or best idea failed to get adopted? Or how many times has the best candidate not gotten the job, or the best vendor not gotten selected, or best product, whatever? Not because they weren't truly the best, but because it wasn't communicated the right way at the right time.
So that's like my why is to bring out what's awesome inside every person so it can live in the world and make a real difference. And that's why I started doing this, because I want those great ideas to land over there, right? I told you so doesn't help anything,
And you said two beautiful things back to back, and I'm going to do them in reverse. The first one we already kind of reinforced, take responsibility for what other people hear. I think you use better words, but take responsibility for what they hear. But I loved, and I couldn't write it down fast enough. It might feel great to tell somebody I told you so. So congratulations on patting your ego on the back. Right. That monster just got a little bit bigger, a little bit more powerful. But if you're telling somebody else I told you so, that means you didn't get what you want. Like, to hear you say it that way, like the diametrically opposing, like, so again, congratulations, you feel great. Told you so, I was right. But I'm sitting over here feeling really good about being right without the thing that I wanted. What is more important?
And dude, and that was what changed my life. Cause up until that moment, I thought I had somehow won because I could say I told you so. But dude, if I did win anything, it was the booby prize of checking the box. I told you so. That is not the goal.
No, it's not. And again, congratulations on feeling better, but that's not the goal. So going back to the early stages of the conversation, you talked about working with super smart people, engineers, financial people, on and on down the line.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, and I'm none of those people, but even I can get lost in what I believe are the beautiful complications of whatever it is that I'm studying, that I'm thinking, that I'm building. I can get way too many levels deep into strategy while people around me are like, what the hell are you doing that for? We already figured this out. So with the work that you do, with all of the smart people that employ you, to get back to this, taking responsibility for what other people hear, how do you help people make the complicated simple?
Ooh, okay. So that's a big one. And the first thing that I think is important to point out is, have you ever noticed how making something really complicated, even more complicated, is pretty easy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. And I see people do that all the time, right? The real goal is to make that super complicated thing simple. And I think about it like the scientific term elegance. I love that term, right? Like everything it needs, nothing it doesn't. That's a great term. And what's funny is in that definition, I think I could make a really good argument that the song Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones is scientifically elegant. Like it's pretty simple. It's two chords. I can play it, E and A, and it's bum, bum, ba-na-now, ba-na-na-na, and then the singing and the drums. And like it's got everything it needs and nothing it doesn't. It's super simple. And I think that there's a lot going on when someone in a really high ranking position needs to communicate something complex to people who they're never explaining that stuff or sharing that stuff with someone who doesn't matter, right? Like if you've got something super complicated and it's a high stakes presentation, it's the board or something, right? And so I think there's a lot of complicated stuff going on there. One of them is, gee, I want to look smart, and the other thing that people always bring in that we've talked about already, I want to establish my credibility. Dude, what are you talking about? You're the freaking CEO, right? Like, they're the board. They know you. You're credible. You don't have to establish your credibility, right? Even if it's your clients, at the big global summit with all your clients, you don't have to establish your credibility just because it's a new position. GE established your credibility. Johnson & Johnson established your credibility. They gave you the title. It's already established, right? Don't worry about that. Don't worry about looking smart. Don't worry about establishing your credibility. Really think about and focus on, again, how can I land it over there? And those all that complexity, it ultimately boils down to something, and what is it that audience listening, what do they need to know about this? They don't need to know everything of all the mechanisms and all that kind of stuff. Oh, you know what? If you take this, your headache will go away, right? Like, okay, do we have to talk about how, that particular painkiller works and what channels it blocks? And like, no, we don't, It might be interesting if it's a novel pathway. We could say normally they use this pathway. This uses this other pathway, which has far less side effects and is better. But that's all we need to know. I show people a picture of just shelves covered with like stuff at a store. And I say, look, this is everything you know. Okay. All that stuff, all those packed, crowded shelves from floor to ceiling. That's what you know. And here's the first thing you need to know on top of that is, I don't want to know all that, right? Like, I don't want to know that. If I knew all of that, I would be you and competing with you for your position. You don't even want me to know it. All I want to know is, where are the treats, right? And then I point to the kicks on the shelf and I'm like, right below the kicks, there's those treats we found when we were in Guatemala and you love them. And I don't know how they get them here, but they're fresh and they're cheap and they're right under the kicks on that shelf right there. I just curated everything I know. And I love that term curate too, right? Because if you bring the most important stuff up, that just feels different than if you try to edit and remove the stuff. Like, no. There's all this stuff, but what are the most important things? Let's curate those, talk about those. And that's all we need, right? We just want the treats as your audience, right? Don't tell us the whole story. Just give us the treats.
And that's a lesson that I'm still learning. And certainly early in my career, had to learn it the hard way over and over again. And often tough feedback. People sitting down and be like, Mike, that 9-minute story you just told could have been like 2.5. Like, we didn't need to know the sunset in the northwest breeze and how the sand felt. Like, all of that was inconsequential. Like, nobody thinks you're lying. You didn't need those details in the story. It takes away from it. I'm going to double down on what you said. That word curate, I think, is fantastic. And please correct me where I might be straying on this. It's not curated based on what we think is important. It's curated based on what the audience needs to experience to achieve your goals.
Absolutely. They hired you because you know all this stuff, right? If you curated it based on what you know and what you care about, you'd tell us everything. That's not your job. We hired you because you know all this, and we are now trusting you to curate the most important stuff out of everything that we couldn't in a lifetime catch up with you to know. We're trusting you to curate the most important stuff for us. And that's really important for us, right? Yes. What do we need to know about that stuff? And in an earlier incarnation, I worked at a .com company, and the two guys, like, in a way, it was because I respected their business knowledge, and I had never really been in business, but boy, I knew the internet and I knew what was happening with the internet, and I could kind of see the future of the internet. And so they hired me to work with them and help them take advantage of the internet. But I made a huge mistake because I didn't know business. So I just told them everything and figured they, with their business knowledge, would figure it out. We went out of business, right? Because I never put my foot down and said, no, this is what I think is going to happen. Out of all these 12 trends, here are the two important ones we need to do something about with my knowledge and my point of view. And so I let them down for what they hired me for, because I told them everything. It's actually can be really damaging.
Again, without maybe the proper context or the next step or the bigger vision.
Yeah.
I could also stand here and make an argument that is the guys with the business smarts, maybe they should have had a little context and asked a few follow-up questions too, but that might be the gap of expectations and like multiple levels to how that played out.
We were all pretty young,
A stack of lessons learned the hard way, which I think is the only way to learn a lesson if we're being really honest.
Yeah.
So I'm on my second page of notes while I'm listening to you as we go through, and we think about keeping the complicated simple and curating what we say and making sure it's important to our audience and not worrying about our own credibility, but it's the emotional credibility and all these things that we're talking about. For most people, even the smartest, even the most successful, you and I do this for a living. And there's still times where I walk out in front of an audience and for the first 30 seconds, I got to calm the butterflies down as I get started.
Dude, heck yeah.
So getting anxious, feeling anxiety, feeling the nerves in any conversation is just normal. And honestly, probably because it's important. If it wasn't important, it wouldn't make us nervous.
You wouldn't care.
So while we're up here juggling chainsaws, trying to do all of this stuff, how do you help people work through that anxiety so they can focus really on being in service to others and not the nerves that they might be feeling?
Okay, so we are going to absolutely loop around. We're going to go in a complete circle here. Perfect. But I start by saying, especially about public speaking, but getting up in front of your peers at work or presenting to the board or talking to the boss, right? Your impression, your impression equals your performance times your exposure moment. So that exposure moment is super short. And your performance is what you're doing all the time. But the impression you make is basically all of that performance multiplied by that teeny tiny exposure moment. So it matters a lot, right? It's outsized important. And look what happened to Jesus, Joan of Arc, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Socrates, the list goes on, right? Get noticed by the group. And so first of all, understand there's a reason we're scared. And there's a word for fearless public speakers. And the word for a fearless public speaker is sociopath. Right? So it's never about not being scared. And you just said it. I will admit it. I was just in Tallinn and Helsinki, and they mean so much to me. And I hadn't been back for like 8 years. I was super nervous. But I'll tell you what I did in a minute, but it makes sense that you're scared. Don't ever put yourself down or think you shouldn't be scared. If you weren't scared, you'd be a sociopath. So that's step one. Then I like to ask people, and I'll ask you, who is nervous about?
I'm nervous about me, right? I'm nervous about my performance. Am I going to hit my mark? Am I going to say that witty thing that I promised? Am I going to, whatever?
Yes. So you being nervous is really you being worried about what they think of you. So the short coaching is stop being so narcissistic.
Ouch.
Okay. But there's a deeper one. And there's a guy that you may know named Snoop Doggy Dogg. And he is where I got some of the best advice for life and leadership and definitely for public speaking. He said, don't be nervous, be at their service, which is what you said at the beginning of this piece of the conversation, right? And he really did say that. And I don't know where I have one, but I have stickers that say, don't be nervous, be at their service, right?
True story. You sent me some of those stickers, and that's where that came from. So I wish I had it with me right now so I could hold it up because they're in my office. They're right over there.
Yeah, they're around here somewhere. But anyway, that is great advice. And I got the same advice, but said totally differently from one of the top leadership coaches anywhere in the world. Her name's Candace Morgan. She told me not long after I heard that from Snoop, Candace said, okay, John, if you get up on stage and you have your attention on yourself, then you have your attention on a minor ball of petty concerns that's of no real interest to anyone else. Ouch, but it's true, right? She said, if, however, you get up on stage and you have your attention on the audience and the difference that you're going to make for them and the difference that they're going to make out there in the world because of it, well, now you've got your attention on something worth thinking about. Don't be nervous, be at their service, right?
I love it. And I got exposed for asking you a question based off a sticker you sent me throughout all of that.
That was hilarious. But
Hey,
I'm glad you got them.
Yeah, we got it in there. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I know that you squeezed this meeting in front of another meeting that you've got, and you just came back from overseas. You have packed so much knowledge into a 1 hour conversation. I did. I took 2 pages of notes. I'm thrilled. I got a bunch. For the people who are listening and they're like, hey, this guy John's actually really awesome. How do I follow him? Where do I learn more? How do I work with him? Where do people need to go to stay in touch with you?
So, super easy, johnbates.com, which is my keynote speaking website. And you can always go there and email me from there about anything. I also have executivespeakingsuccess.com, which is focused on my leadership communications coaching and training. I do a lot of one-on-one executive coaching. I do a lot of small team, large team coaching. And then I do a ton of free content that I hope is good, that I go out of my way to make good at LinkedIn. So I'm just linkedin.com/in/John Bates. And then finally, if you go to johnbates.com or you go to Executive Speaking Success and you just wait for like 3 seconds, a pop-up will come up. And that's where people can get the same newsletter that I send to all of my clients, like NASA and Johnson & Johnson and Boston Scientific. I create this for them. But if you go to my website, wait for that pop-up, sign up for my free mini trainings, they'll be free to you. And I really go out of my way to make that, that's my gift back to the universe for all the good I get, is I do stuff that can make a huge difference for someone, even if they never could afford to work with me. I can still make a huge difference for their public speaking and their leadership and their life.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that. And we'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. So nobody has to go hunting for them. They'll be right there. John, I can't thank you enough for the time you took, the conversations we've had even before hitting record, this conversation today. It has been my pleasure. Thank you for sharing all of your brilliance with us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Michael. Can I tell you one final little thing before we go? So as a public speaker, as a keynote speaker all over the world for the last 15, actually, I did it, for my career before this too. I used to think I was the big deal because I was the speaker, right? They flew me in, they put me in a nice room. They were all sitting there listening to me. And then, I had an experience where I lost my .com company in 2000, end of 2000, and almost died of an autoimmune disease. Had a conversation with the universe, God, the big is, whatever it is, and said, look, if you let me live, I promise I will make my number one goal be to make a difference. Like everything else will come second to that. And I got to live. I was not okay for a while, but I'm back and I'm okay. And I've kept that promise. And I'm really proud of myself for keeping that promise. And it has completely changed my life in so many ways. But one of the ways that it changed my life is that it got me really present to why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing this to make a difference. So there I was, here I am in the past, flying around, thinking I'm the big difference. I'm the big deal. I'm making a difference. And then it hit me. Oh my gosh, this thing should not be called a talk because I'm one person in a room of 3,000 people or 200 people or whatever it is. I'm one person talking and everybody else in the room is listening. And I make no difference without the generosity of their listening. And it really reset how I relate to what I do and how it feels to show up in that room, and how grateful I am for people like you, Michael, who give me the generosity of your listening. Like, your listening is so generous. When I show up and you're listening to me, I look like a freaking superstar. And guess what? That's not how it is when I'm in my office by myself. So I really, really appreciate that. And I hope you get the compliment I mean to pay you. And I hope then, and I think there's a great lesson for anyone who's a speaker or a leader in that we make no difference without the generosity of the listening of those around us, right?
Oh, that's a beautiful perspective. First, obviously, I'm glad you're healthy and you're well. It's a beautiful perspective. I think with that perspective alone would carry so many people so much further if they could adopt it. And thank you for sharing everything that you did to give us a reason to listen, right? I mean, we could have chosen at any point in time, but how do we not listen? And I think you hit your goal of not insulting our listening while you went through it. So it wraps up perfect. It wraps up perfect.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
I appreciate it, man. I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much. Stay safe out there. John, thank you for a tremendous conversation. I appreciate all your energy, all the lessons, the personal stories that you shared, everything you brought into that conversation. I was taking notes the whole time. I certainly hope everybody listening was taking notes along the way as well. That was a phenomenal conversation. There's so many things I could go back and highlight, but I really love how you talked about why it's important to trust ourselves as communicators. Our credibility is already in place, or we wouldn't be in whatever room that we're in, and therefore trust the audience to understand what it is that we're putting out there for them. Two very, very important comments about trust. I think that I told you so story was spectacular. I might be saying I told you so, but that's covering up for the fact that I didn't get what I wanted. Tremendous perspective. Great call out. If I feel good about saying I told you so, it's because I didn't get what I want. And I know I just said that twice, but I wanted to make sure it was clear. And take responsibility for what people hear. What we say isn't as important as what people hear. Speakers who don't get nervous are sociopaths. All great points. I love everything that you shared today, John. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And thank you to everybody that stuck with us for another episode. We truly do appreciate it. Thank you for coming back week after week, month after month, year after year to continue to learn from these incredible guests that volunteer their time to share their expertise with us. Please, while you're here, take a quick moment to like the show, subscribe to the show, certainly share it with your network, leave us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. And take a quick moment to look up our sponsors before you head off the computer today. Humantel.com is the place to go to get the best online training to learn how to determine when people's emotions are shifting and what they're likely feeling by accurately interpreting changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. The code is Inquasive25 for 25% off that training once you're there. For the professional interviewers, you know where to go, certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get everything you need to know about joining and contributing to the International Association of Interviewers and earning and leveraging your certified forensic interviewer designation. And finally, while you're online today, please check out Inquasive.com to learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to encourage people to share truthful information under stressful moments so we can uncover hidden value in all of our high impact conversations. We appreciate you being here for another week. Please stay safe. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.